Welcome to this edition of the African Tea Time. Today we are having Dr. Lutomia, who is, I have a detailed, I will be crucified today if I don't do this justice. So bear with me as I do welcome uh, our presenter for the day. Most of you have interfaced with, with Dr. Lutomia, and she has just a second here, let me pull up something. So yeah, she was here, but has since left for Padue. But just to introduce her a little bit, this I will be moderating this. I'm Jorem Awadu, and yep, I'm here in the Department of Psychiatry on MSU now. Dr. Lutomia, Namatsi Lutomia is a sister, aunt, daughter, other mother, plant parent, cook, teacher, researcher, community organizer, mentor, and poet. She holds a doctoral degree in human resource development with a minor in gender studies from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, US. She is currently a postdoctoral researcher with scientific animation without borders at Purdue University in Indiana. Her current research interests span scientific collaboration, nonprofit leadership, adult learning, gender, and secondary effects of COVID-19. She also studied kinetic teachings and African ways of knowing for 6 years with elders Seva Ahmad Azahi and Mother Atum Azahi of the Cultural Wellness Center in Minnesota, US. She is engaged in African storytelling and poetry as epistemological and pedagogical sites of enhancing the archive and increasing intergenerational learning. Anne is a member of the Urbana-Champaign Poetry Collective and has published her poems extensively. Her storytelling interests were ignited by her maternal grandmother. She intends to write and publish children's books that capture the stories narrated to her by her grandmother. Welcome to this edition of the African Tea Time. And Anne, Dr. Lutomia, you are welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Awadu. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and do what we're called to do here today. Today, I'm going to be sharing my work, and this is from my dissertation work that I did in 2019. I started doing it a while ago, and I managed to defend my dissertation at the end of 2019. So here I'm going to be looking at the successes and challenges of a scientific collaboration between the United States and Benin. So I'll be looking at this program that is in the US and in Benin, and just highlighting what happened, what were the successes in this collaboration, what were the challenges, and then what was suggested as improvement. So I'll start off with my agenda. I'm gonna do an introduction, then background. I'll touch on the problem statement, purpose of the study, why this research is significant, the theoretical framework, the literature review, then the methods, findings, takeaways, implications, and future research. I might skip some of this due to time because I want to do other things here. So apropos of introduction to this topic here, so it's we all know that collaboration has been thought to be a good thing. Indeed, now it's rated when human resource managers are looking for employees. This is one of the top skills that they're looking for nowadays. So when it comes to scientific collaboration, scientists are always working in collaboration here, and it's thought to be a good thing because it brings together people from different disciplines, and it's also been made easy because of technology and because of the decrease in government funding. People are usually nudged to work together to use the scarce resources. And then importantly, one of the top SDG, or one that distills the Sustainable Development Goal, the SDG number 7, looks at partnerships as a way to completing the sustainable development goals. So they're urging that people partner, they collaborate, they form coalitions so that they can work on the various goals, bring their strengths together so that they can efficiently use the resources. So the the international scientific collaboration as a body of knowledge has been in existence or has excited people for the past 25 years. And what scientists have done with this is one, look at how they're working together. So sometimes they look at it along information science, where you see these maps that show who is working with who. Like if you do a Google of scientific collaboration, international scientific collaboration, and go to images, you'll see which scientists work together most. Yeah. So one of the things that will stand out for you when you look at Africa is that collaborations mostly take place in Egypt and in South Africa with the global waste. So there's minimal in a sense there's very minimal collaboration along science between scientists in the West or the ones in Africa uh, compared to the robust scientific collaboration that we're seeing now, even from the Americans working with the Chinese or the Westerners, the Germans, for example, the British working with the Chinese. So there you see a network that is so robust. So what, like I said before, the good things that come out of collaborations, especially now. Then I was not writing along COVID-19, but if we situate in COVID-19, we're seeing innovations that have come up just because people are collaborating. This vaccine was a highly collaborative, hyper collaborative effort, and then we get the vaccine. So you see innovations, you see a flow of knowledge, you see people using their resources efficiently and effectively, and therefore all these scholars have argued that this is a way that we want to do collaboration. Now, there are ways that collaboration is urged. Sometimes, and I'll speak to it later, but the literature on international scientific collaboration shows that sometimes individuals use their network to form collaborations, but sometimes the donors or the funders mandate that people work together. So if once they call a proposal out a proposal for funding, in it they'll say we're looking for, if you're going to apply, you will be a university, say in the in the US, like what MSU sometimes puts out. Here there's a call, and you're meant to be collaborating with specific universities in Africa that we have historically worked with. So that's the nature of collaboration. Whether it's completely good, it remains to be seen. So then, so the background around this idea of scientific collaboration, like I said before, it's pushed along sustainable development goals. It's looked at politically, and it's epistemic when you look at North-South collaboration, because there it becomes very political, as in who has the power, who is said to have knowledge. So there's that here when those collaborations are thought of. International scientific collaborations are thought to highly encouraged when it comes to STEM subjects, you know, and and the NSF pushes for scientists to collaborate along the North-South North-South entities. The North here, I mean the Western world, to be Europe, the US, Canada, yeah, and then the global South is Latin America, Asia, Africa, yeah. So then international collaboration has become problematic, and some scholars have questioned the ways in which the hierarchies are formed, or who is considered to be the one that is crafting the knowledge, who is acknowledged when you look at the various articles that come out of this, and therefore the knowledge, who is seen to be the one um, pushing the agenda. So a number of scholars like Amutabi, Zalezer, Okwaro, and Gilsler have argued that we need to decolonize the way we do research, especially the way we do research along uh, North-South collaboration. What they see is that there's a symmetry of power with the West dominating, and they also say that the funders tend to control the agenda, the planning is haphazard, and then um, there's unresponsiveness among collaborators. In some cases, the collaborators in the south have been thought to be sometimes unresponsive, and even the ones in the north. So they've argued for development of very collaborative agendas that are robust and that show what the roles of individuals will be playing and that are ethical. You know, so the purpose of this study was it was a single case study, and it was to increase the knowledge and understanding of North-South collaboration, especially when it comes to scientific collaboration. And what I did is that I looked at a program based an R1 university in the Midwest and its collaborative organization in Benin. So a little bit about Benin. I kind of did a lot here because I thought there'd be many people, some would not know about Benin, but maybe I'll have to cut off some things. So Benin is what they would call a francophone country based in West Africa, and but the neighbors of these countries are Nigeria, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Togo. So uh, Benin before was called Dahomey, or People's Republic of Benin, but now it's called Benin. It gained its independence from France in 1960. This is the flag of Benin. It's green, yellow, and red. Uh, so when it comes to population, there are 13 million, about 13 million people in Benin, and it's diverse. You know, there are people, the Fon people, the Ajar, Yoruba, Bariba, the Fulani, Otomari, Yoa, Dendi, and then there are other people from other communities who live there. You know, Lebanese, uh, white people, Asians. Yeah, so there's a population of 1.9% foreigners who live there. Now, when you look at the demographics of Benin, it's very emblematic of other African countries. So you see that a lot of their population is from 0 to 54, you know, and a high percentage is 0 to 14 to 15 to 24. So it's those, you know, the graph, the way they do population graph, it expands at the bottom and really narrows at the top. You know, that's very, like I said, emblematic of a lot of demographic graphs of African countries. So when it comes to major urban centers in Benin, there's Porto Novo, which is the capital city, and then there is Abomey, Calavi, where that's the government seat. Now, when you look at these populations, you see that a lot of the people in Benin live in the countryside, you know. So maybe we might approximate 2 million live in these urban centers. You know? And when you zone in, you see that most of them are in the south of the country compared to the north. Then again, about about Benin, it's a francophone country, so the official language is French, but the other languages spoken are Fon and Yoruba. Then there are other um, languages like I mentioned before. The people I mentioned before speak those languages that like Fulani. Say when it comes to religion, this is very interesting because of what Benin is known for globally. They're 27% are Muslim, then 25 Catholics, then 13 Protestant. Then they practice voodoo, and it's 11.6%. Indeed, Benin is known to be the center of voodoo. And then there's a melange of Christianity and traditional um, religions, and yeah, and then there are others. So when we talk about Benin, the things that Benin is known for, one of it is the Dahomey Amazons. When you watch the movie Black Panther, they were presented. This is a group of women who, in the 1600s, worked with the king, and they were able to to fight and win foreigners. Yeah, so they would be, they globally they are known as the Dahomey Amazons, but they're called the Minot or Minons, and it means our mothers. So we also along Voodoo, Benin is also known for the Python Temple in Ouidah. So the Voodoo is practiced there, and people go to to wither, not only for the to see the Python temple, but just a lot of earth and spiritual practices that exist there that are embedded into African understanding of spirituality. And then there are famous people from Benin who we might know. Jimon Gaston Husu. Husu, he acts. He's an accomplished actor and he's also a producer. And then Angelique Kidjo, who's won numerous Grammy Awards. She recently won the 2020 Grammy Award and had won some others a while ago. It's a well accomplished musician too. There are others, but I just thought I'd mention those. So the research question in this study was, how is the process of scientific collaboration established? So I wanted to know, how do people come about in developing a scientific collaboration, especially scientists? I also wanted to know, how do members of North-South collaboration describe their scientific collaboration process experience? So what experiences did they have? And then I also wanted to find out the successes and challenges that they had faced during these collaborations. And lastly, I was interested in them articulating how they thought they would improve these collaborations. So how I went about to look at it is I borrowed from systems theory, where it argued in any process you have the antecedents or conditions that uh, drive uh, drive this process. And in collaboration, we argue that there are antecedents of collaboration. It could be the purpose that you have, the goals, the objectives of the relationship that you have. Yeah. And therefore, when the collaboration is about to happen, they inform the process of collaboration, which would then morph into the roles and responsibilities that you'd have, how you're gonna make decisions jointly, and this is very very important in collaboration. This is what makes collaboration away from other ways of working together. The fact that you make the decisions jointly, you come up with governance processes, who is going to be doing what, and who is going to, and issues of communication, and who sends what emails, how do we respond to the emails, and all that. And then there's a convener. So even though we share the power equally, there's always someone who is convening the process or the project. Yeah. And what we expect to have as the outcome or the output is that our goal or what we endeavor to do is achieved. So if we wanted to say train 30 scientists, we'd be measuring for that at the end. Now, if other incidental outcomes happen, the better. Yeah. So this is kind of what was shaping and informing my process here. Now, about that process, it might seem linear, but it's very iterative here. And they're human beings, so there's emotions, there's the nature of human beings as this process takes place. Yeah. So when I looked at the literature review uh, on this on collaboration, collaboration, there was a repertoire of discussions around defining collaboration. So it's very clouded, yeah. So depending on the discipline that people are in, they see collaboration to be, say, one person leads the project, yeah. And then there's a whole literature about collaboration being um, away from partnership, mostly around the fact that in collaboration you're making the decision jointly, and partnerships you might not, yeah. And in collaboration, there's some flexibility, and in partnership there's a lot of writing down everything, having these legal agreements, so and then when it came to scientific collaboration research and how it's organized, it had three strands. There's the global phenomena of increasing co-authorship, for example. There were there was a lot of discussion about contributing factors and costs of collaboration. you know then there was a lot of literature that is just looking on how people publish and the algorithms, and then the scientometric analysis, which I was telling you about, all these maps um, that are showing who is collaborating with who and what type of journals are people publishing in, and what are they publishing about. So there are bodies of people who are just interested in that. You know. Okay. So when it came to method, when I did this study, the methods that I used was qualitative inquiry. I was mostly looking at this as a single case study. I The setting was at an R1 university in the Midwest in the US and at an international agricultural research organization in Benin. And here too, I looked at 11 participants who were working on this project. The participants were based in Benin, 8 of them, and 3 were based in the US. A very interesting phenomenon is that out of these 11 in total participants, 3 were women, 3 scientists here, 2 were based in Benin and 1 was based in the US. So the instruments I used was I did an in-depth interview uh, where it was unstructured, where I had calls or I sat in with these scientists to interview them. I also looked at the documents that they'd use for example, the various documents of the other university and the organization on how they started the collaboration and the agreements that they had. I looked at their website. I went into the artifacts and the archives that they had. For example, they this 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 project was funded by USAID. So there were various reports that were produced over the years. It was a 5-year project. So I came to it at the end of the 2 years of the project. So then I was doing the member checking when I wanted to validate. I did member checking. Member checking is where after I've transcribed my data, I went back to the individuals to check in to have them read my transcription and set whether it was true. Then I did triangulation, and with the and my triangulation was two-way. When I'm having them verify the having them verify what they've stated. And secondly, I used a method called found poetry, which I'll talk about later. And then there was my positionality as a researcher. Everyone has always asked me why I did this research. I was driven to do this research because I have always worked in collaboration. My first work or job was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where you're always working in collaboration. Then I worked at an international NGO where I worked in countries in Africa, Benin being one of them, and it calls for collaboration. Then when I came to the US too, I still worked in the nonprofit sector, and I was at the university, always collaborating. So this I always wanted to find out how what do other people feel about collaborations or how we work together or teamwork here. So there was that curiosity. And another thing about my positionality is that I had worked with this organization that I was doing research with, so it was very easy for me to access. I knew the people in Benin, I knew the one in the US. I bracketed myself as I did this research to just take care of my biases, and that's how come I share my positionality. I I'm lucky that I speak French, so it was easy for me to interview uh, the scientists in Benin. Though something very interesting, they were very happy that I spoke English too, and they're like, "Oh, it's time for us to practice our English. You always have English sessions every week, so you won't interview us in French. You will interview us in English." So we'd start off in French. You know, when I call one and telling them I'll interview them and what it's about, I started off in French, and that was good because it enabled us to have this camaraderie, Yeah, so yeah, that went on very well, and this also helped me to study myself as someone who is always working in collaborations. This whole practice that I did around this study was very good at enabling me to check my experience and my bias as I've worked in collaboration. Then my data analysis, I used Atlas TI8. So it's a computer-based analysis tool. So I use that one to analyze my tool. Uh, and then I used grounded theory. That informed the way I wanted to analyze. Then I used found poetry. So it helped me to code. Yeah. I'll show you later what I did with found poetry. I was so happy that my committee allowed me to use this because I'm a poet. So this was very good. Then presenting the data. So that's how my analysis went. So the findings of the various questions, especially, the first question I'm asking, how do they establish their collaborations? So there are themes that emerged out of this. Like, for example, they engage in long and short-term interaction leading to collaboration. So these scientists would tell me how they knew each other ever since they were in grad school. So, for example, the leading scientist in Benin had been to a university with the leading scientists in at a Midwest here, and they'd done the PhD together, and they'd met at conferences. So years after, when they wanted to do research together, they it was easy for them to just remember that their advisors had connected them, so they worked together, uh, on those projects. Other scientists said, "Oh, someone just sent me an email from Italy, and they introduced themselves. They're a scientist, and they wanted some specimens." Because a lot of these scientists that I worked with were entomologists. So this was a scientist in Africa who said that they found me on LinkedIn, they wrote me, and I sent them the specimen. So it starts off in a very interesting way. Some of them have got a long relationship, some of them don't. Yeah. Then within this, there's a lot of frequent communication and follow up. This art of following up, the scientist said, it produced a robust collaboration because you tend to know someone because you're communicating frequently, and then it also led to trust. You know, so if I trust you and I know you, I will be able to collaborate with you. So trust was very important here. Um, they also look at how they're publishing when they go to conferences, the work that they do to assess whether they can work with someone. Yeah. So if you've got the same research interest, and if someone is channeling out all this interesting research, then maybe they might be interested in working with them. Uh, because they were within institutions, they had to sign agreements to formalize their collaborations. What many of them told, what the scientists told me, they just did this for formalities, but they knew because they trusted each other and they had their relationships. These were just formalities. Yeah, the fact that they had signed a paper was not, sorry, oh my God, was not the one that is making them work together. They're working together because they have a relationship. Yeah. So a further description of collaboration process by the scientists was that scientists have mixed feelings about past collaboration experiences that inform ongoing participation. So, for example, they had very positive experiences of collaboration. One of the students that one young scientist who had been a student in this project, she this one of the the outcomes of the USAID project was to develop young scientists. So she had been able to do her PhD, and she had been mentored from this project. So she had such positive memories out of this project. But there was one scientist who had who two scientists actually had told me they had not had a very good experience with collaboration. Because one told me, I met someone on LinkedIn. They asked me to send specimen, and I sent the specimen. And the next time, they called me and told me, we have published our paper. Uh, Thank you so much for the help you gave us. So then he was not even recognized. Yeah. And then there are also other cases where many of the scientists based in Africa say that when they collaborate with people not in this program, they would collect the data and analyze and send it to the North. And when the publication is done, their names are not there, or they're in the footnote being thanked. You know, so there are those cases. Yeah. Scientists, and then another theme that came up was scientists establish and perform roles to complete the collaboration activities. So yeah, there were various activities that they had to do within the collaboration, and some of them enable them to take on leadership or to go to another country, and they they had to agree who is going to do what. You know, so if a research, the ones in Benin could be able to do, for example, they had an armyworm infestation when the project was going on, and the funder said, "Oh yeah, you need to go to Niger, work in Burkina Faso, work in Ghana." So they are the ones who had to do that work, yeah, or going to the field. So in this research, the ones in the US had the equipment that to be able to work on on the armyworms. So the armyworms could be put in a container DHL and sent to the lab here, but the ones in the field are interacting with the farmers here. And in this project, things went on very smoothly. I have to admit that one of the techniques that my advisors asked me to do, and I feel like it enriched my experience, was to ask them about the project I was studying, but also ask them about other experiences of collaboration. Yeah. So you'll see that I'm referring to both of these. The scientists constantly collaborated about the activities they were working on. Yet, so along communicating, they have to write each other and indicate what are the milestones we are achieving. We say the students who are being sponsored are now doing their lab sessions. How are they being mentored? ADHD. And they also argued this was before COVID-19. They were already using technology. They were not using Zoom. Skype, there was a time Skype was on vogue more than Zoom, even though Zoom was there, right? So they were using Skype a lot. These scientists were already savvy on using Skype. Even my interviews and my follow-ups, I used Zoom, because some of them came to the US. I interviewed them face to face. But then when they went back home, I could be able to follow up. Some collaboration processes vary from one organization to another. Yeah, they felt that when they worked with some people, especially with organizations uh, based in the north, the way people see collaboration is very different. Some of it just means the collaborators from the west visit the site once in a year to see what you're doing. Or there are times when the collaborators are very engaging, so they even bring their partners or their collaborators in Africa to the US. Yeah, so there's a little bit of difference. Some of it depending on the funds, some of it depending on just the human nature of individuals. So, for example, one of the scientists say that one of the ways that we really humanize our collaboration is that when they come to Benin, we take them out for dinner and we invite them to meet our families, yeah. And when we go to the US, we do the same. So we know each other deeply, you know. So I'm capturing here some of the things that my scientists say. For example, initiating relationship. One of them said, so normally, some of the relationship already exists. So we know these people, for example, some people we have met through conference or, through other people, so like networking. But many of the people we didn't know. So what we did, we just take on internet and Google for people and and for people that were as person this topic, and then we send them an email and then they respond. So here you're seeing that there are two ways that they do it. The people that they know or they've got networks with, but then there's people relying on the internet and they going onto LinkedIn or Googling these people and they see the topics there that the person is known for, and then they send them an email and sometimes someone responds and voila, there's a collaboration starting to emerge. And identifying collaborators, some of them said, I think one of the important things is to know about the comparative advantage of the collaborators' engagement and the expertise that each collaborator has and can bring in to make the project successful. Here, so one of the lead scientists told me when he collaborates, he looks at the comparative advantage. What is it that I have that the other person that doesn't have, that, or what is it that the strength of the other person will complement with mine. So there's this idea of looking at the portfolio of someone and asking to work them on a project here, so that you can know you can your comparative you look at this comparative advantage and see how they can complement each other. Yeah. So going on, speaking of the successes that some of these collaborators had, they had collaborators at a personal, organizational, collaborative level. So at the personal level, it's just the person themselves. What did they feel successful? Organization, as when they look at the whole organization, and then collaborative is the whole collaboration that they were in. So for example, when it came to individuals, uh, some scientists felt they got all this knowledge and skills, and they were able to publish. They were mentored, and they gained career advancement. One of the women that I really found outstanding was this woman who is in her 50s, had got into this organization by starting off as volunteering. Then later on, after 5 years, she was absorbed as a program assistant, and now she had become an associate at this organization, and even become one of the movers and shakers of science, women scientists in West Africa. By just and it's all because she's been collaborating, she's been mentored well. Still, in the same vein, there was a younger scientist who, within this project that I was looking at, got a scholarship, was able to finish her PhD, then eventually worked at this lab and eventually was employed there. And now she was having a project, a little project for the girls in primary schools in Benin to start embracing STEM and become scientists. That was interesting. Successful collaboration attains the vision, themes, and goals of the project. So this project had vision, themes, and goals that were measured quarterly, and then at when it was halfway, and then the final. And it was seen to be successful because they attained these goals that they were supposed to have. So by the time by the time I was looking at the various reports, it's like I said, it's a USAID project. I could be able to see they kind of measure the milestone. They done very well along the project I was looking at. Then when it comes to collaborative level, most of them felt like they build another network of they build networks as an organization, both with the US based one, but also in the various countries of the projects took place. For example, in Benin, in Niger, in Ghana. Yeah, so now they had new networks that they could work with in future. So then when it came to the challenges that they faced, they 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 experienced a variety of challenges. Yeah. So they say it was just difficult to work with some organizations. Some of them were not willing to work with them. So it would mean visiting them so many times, or even now at a certain point not continuing with the work that they were doing because the organization has all this bureaucracy. For example, they indicated to me that they'd had a problem working with the government in Benin for some time because at a certain point the government froze the recruitment of scientists, retrenched some and froze. Yeah, so they were not they could not access a certain type of scientists that they wanted because scientists were busy working with the government activity. So yeah, so they had those problems. They also had difficulties in establishing collaborations, either because the other collaborator uh, was not interested in collaboration and they thought they'd collaborate. Like the two cases, like one, I said there's a scientist, for the scientist who's based in the US, said another scientist in the US approached them that they could collaborate, and eventually the scientists published their research on their own. Uh, so it just became difficult to have any further collaboration with these scientists. You know? Then there were challenges that they faced also sometimes were language. They spoke English, but um, though at various levels. Some of the scientists had gotten trained in the US, so their English was at a higher level, but the ones who were not trained in the US were having problems. And one of the things they told me about not being very fluent in English is that they took them so long to practice for their conferences because most of the scientific conferences are in English. Yeah, so English is the language of science. If it was interesting when I did this study, I went back to see how science has evolved. There was a time German was the language of science. Yeah. Then there was a difficulty in time zones, and when I was talking to them too, I could see that. So I had to wake up early to have those interviews. And then there's technology variation. Yeah. So definitely in science, the West is always ahead of many countries in the global South in technology. Uh, the scientists, especially in the global south, said there was a lot of work. They experience work overload because sometimes there's a lot that is expected for them to do, especially going to the field in many countries, coming late in the evening. Yeah. Then there is that they then another impediment that they felt is unethical collaborative practices away from where some scientists would call them and then to take the specimen and that problem of not being including publications. There was also a major problem with the scientists in Africa where they said when a scientist from the West was recruited, even if they went to the same school in the US or in Europe, when they go to work in the same organization, because that's an international organization, their European scientists were paid more. They lived in a better neighborhood than them. They had other benefits, like their tickets would be paid to go back home. Their children would go to the international school, and all of that was paid for. So there were these practices that took place in this the national organization that are they have a slant towards social injustices, and let's call it what it is, racism, right? You see very well the legacies of colonialism, which favors certain bodies and defavors others. So and then they had practices by funders that led to challenges. So they said they had problems with funders because they said funders sometimes are interested in a project for a certain period and want a certain product or certain outcomes. Yeah, and it's just for that period. So what the farmers want is a continuation. But the farmers, but since the funders are just interested in certain goals of a certain period, when they come back to another project, they don't continue with what they did. So it ends up the scientists feel like um, the community is always asking them what happened with the name project. Then they say, oh, the organization is not looking at that anymore. We're looking at on other things. So there are all these projects that start and are never really completed because the funding period has ended. You know, uh, and then there was the issue of unsustainable funding. Yeah, so which is bleeds onto the other one because there's you rely on funding from funders, you do, and therefore you cannot complete projects or you cannot pay your employees or the various individuals in the field because your remuneration of the project highly depends on the funds or the donors. Then some of the scientists say they experienced political instability and disease outbreak that affected collaboration. Case in point was when they were in Burkina Faso. There were some bombings and they had to fall out of that country. And then in Sierra Leone, one of them shared when they worked there, they'd been working with the university, Jalar, and when Ebola happened, they had to fold and leave. But then they continued to do virtual collaboration. Yeah. So, and then when it came to how they want to improve this North-South collaboration, some of them say they want more formalization of collaboration using signed agreements. For example, the ones that were called to send specimens, they say that now they're not going to trust the fact that someone has just contacted you from LinkedIn or from the internet to work with you, and you just trust that they wanted to see some written uh, formalized agreement. They also wanted to have more funding for capacity building so that they can increase the number of scientists, especially when it comes to funding for PhD programs. They're interested in more discussions around that. They're also interested in getting more funding when they get a project for them to publish in open source journals so that they can be able to access those journals. They like the idea of open source journals, but they said it was very expensive to publish there. What they liked was that when you publish with an open source journal, you can be able to access other articles within that journal. They they also desired more inclusive collaboration. They were interested in collaborations being rooted in inclusiveness from the beginning. You know that everyone is involved in creating the goals and objectives, and they know the outcomes, and not the way funders just come up with a call and they're not included, and then they're just being involved in their operations, which can be mechanical sometimes and difficult. So some of the things that I'm capturing from, so just to show you what they said verbatim, is, for example, as far as challenge is concerned, one of them say we had to move from one country to another because of political instability. we do not have the luxury of the various reasons they give for successful collaboration. The longevity of involvement of collaborators, social bonds, and commitment to grow, mutual interests and values. We were lucky things worked out. So here, just having to move because of yeah of instability. Then successes. I would say this project was successful because we were able to use indigenous knowledge as outlined in the themes and goals. Farmers have been practicing certain technologies for thousands of years. I think it's important to involve farmers in terms of considering what they know and how science can help them improve this knowledge for cost effectiveness. So this is a scientist from Benin who was so happy that the project in itself was pushing for indigenous knowledge to be infused into how they're working with farmers. Yeah. So he was happy about this success. Another one who spoke about the improving future collaboration said, creating relationship with those in charge of international programs, construction relationship is absolutely critical for faculty members. For institutions that have low turnover in those areas, this is easier for principal investigators to do. But if you happen to have high turnover, then it's a challenge. Yeah. So this one was my American-based scientist, and he was like, yeah, he'd been very successful at his international programs contract because the people he worked with had been there, so he doesn't really need to explain things anew. And they thought that's helpful. But if you work in an institution where people keep on changing, then every time you're building new relationships. Another one and another one on giving advice. So my advice would be if you engage your institution, then make sure you have enough knowledge of what is required to make your collaboration successful by involving staff in the project development office of your institution. Sometimes we have to send the project proposal to our legal advisor and check if there are anything that would be detrimental to our involvement in that project. Yeah. So yeah, so this is just advice that they're giving for a successful collaboration. If you get, especially for people who want to get into international collaborations for the first time, is to engage your legal advisor to have a second eye so that things do not come up in future. So, what was my takeaway in this project here? So, what my takeaways were five of them that which so maintain trust even if it's inconvenient. So this idea of these scientists, even though they said they didn't want to collaborate with people who would dip them, they were trustful of continuing to work with us in the north. They were saying that we still want to work with them for the good. Yeah. So they wanted things checked out, but they were like, we need to trust each other scientists to continue working because science is good for everyone. Then there's also this idea of prioritize face-to-face interaction. These scientists felt like they wanted to see the scientists they're working with, you know, because just meeting with each other online had caused some problems, and it takes away from the humanizing of the project or knowing someone so that when they tell you they're not able to do something, if you know them, then you can humanize the reason they're telling you. Yeah. Another one was to rethink the collaborative practices and assumptions. There are some assumptions that people have around collaboration, that it's just always going to be smooth. We have to understand that sometimes there are challenges, sometimes the things will not go the way we plan them to happen. And especially when for the scientists in Africa, sometimes they would delay because they have to go to the field. The field is far, and they have to send things by DHL, and so in the capital city. So sometimes the collaborators in the West felt like things were delaying until they went there for a week and they saw what they go through. Then they're like, "Wow, this how come things delay? Because you went for a week to collect the data, then it rains, then the Land Rover is stuck somewhere. It takes so long for you to bring some of the specimen that is needed, or the farmers have another activity, So yeah, there were all those problems. Now consider practical and theoretical expertise of scientists from the South. Here, the scientists felt like their voices are not heard enough, and especially their experience, It's what I was talking about. The things that they do and the ways that they know about operating in those spaces. That when when collaborating in these north-south collaborations, we need to listen to them. Then lastly, it's this idea of inclusivity, where especially where these international scientific collaborations have not fully looked at uh, the racism and injustices that are very much embedded in the ways that they work with scientists in the global south and especially in Africa. So yeah, that was my those were my takeaways from my study. Then the implications of my research. My research has implications in ways in which we define collaboration. It's not a pure and sterile activity. It has its own issues. So we need to also inject in this idea of being wary of collaborations not going the way they should be. It's not just necessarily, it's a good thing, but it also is problematic. Um, I also, this study has got implications in ways that we understand collaboration and decolonizing science, or how is science done on the ground, and who gets to be acknowledged and who gets not to be acknowledged, and how are those preferences trafficking the world. And when working in Africa, how are the Anglophone scientists treated compared to Francophone um, scientists? Um, then when it comes to organizational injustices, you're the remunerating of scientists, making them equal. If you're hiring people because of their knowledge, pay them the same. You know, have them live in certain conditions that are equal. You know, then looking at the ethics of collaboration, this study has implication in that, not just even in the formulation, in the day-to-day uh, ways in which collaboration is trafficked. You know, uh, and lastly, scientists from the South having agency. This is going to change, but there's not a lot of work that has been done around scientists in the South being given voice. Uh, um, so there has to be a shift where scientists from the South don't feel like they'll be punished if they give voice. Indeed, most of them told me that the science world is very small. So scientists know each other globally. You know, if you're an entomologist, you will get to know other entomologists. So if you want to raise issues, sometimes you become afraid because you might never get another grant in future. So there has to be a whole discussion around giving agency to the scientists in the global south and looking at the vestiges of colonialism and decolonizing ways in which scientists' voices are made or are squashed out of the discussion of uh, who is who in science. In science. So what I've been wanting to do with this research is to go back and follow up on those scientists. It's been 1 year, and things have changed. It's been COVID-19, so going to see how they're doing other collaborations. Then here I did a case study and I looked at a small project. I'd like to use mixed methods, have a robust number of scientists, use quantitative and qualitative inquiry, look at various regions and countries, for example, get into this country and observe how these scientists, for example, if they're working in the lab in some situations, see how they do. Now, I had promised to talk about shifts in scientific collaboration practices due to COVID-19. I will not get into that. We might put it at the end as a discussion, but I have been lucky to work with scientists ever since I graduated. I work in a multidisciplinary team because I bring in qualitative inquiry. So if you have questions, you can ask me around that. But I also wanted to show you something that I told you I did with my research, and that's the poetry that I created, uh, and therefore give voice to experiences of these scientists. I'll just show you one, and then we'll move to another part of this discussion here. So I had a number of poems that I created from my work, my interviews. You know, so so this, for example, is a poem that I call the Bad Collaborator. So I used found poetry. So what you do with found poetry is that you go into a paragraph or a book or anything, and you look for various sentences or lines with the mind of a poet, and you develop a poem. So with this one, I'll not read it. I end up coming up with this poem. So you see, oh, that's that line there. So all this becomes a poem here. Here. So it's speaking about what 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 this person cries about the bad collaborator. He says, "Oh, collect the data for us and send us the data. We'll then analyze, write publication, and these kinds of things. You go to the field, collect the data, send the data." I have seen publications even without the names of the people who have collected the data in the first place, and I think this is not correct. We did work together. I provided most of the information. When the paper was accepted, he sent me a copy. On the first page, he said he only said greeting. I think in future I will get into agreements before working with someone I do not know. In the agreement, you have to tell what exactly to do with each of the partners, how to do it, way forward. When and when and everything is clear, what will be and the advantage or advantages of each partner. So everything should be clearly defined in the agreement. I didn't see the publication. I don't know if my name was in, though I collaborated with him to collect the data. Yeah. So in another one where I talk about a successful collaboration, I do the same too. I do the same uh, technique of found poetry. And it was a long one, but I'll just read, say, that first section. It was good. The collaboration was good. I gave the liberty to each scientist of each country. The scientists of Calpi for the first time chose the site. It is important. Establish the project. Collect the data every time. Send the data. I go there to collect the data. Distribute money for the data collection and hold a discussion on the improvement. So yeah, that's the end of my discussion of today. Um, Feel free to share comments and your views about this work because I really want to develop it further and continue sharing it with these scientists and communities in the global north and south.
Oh, thank you. Oops, did I lose? Okay, fine. Thank you, Dr. Lutomia. Oh my God, I don't know where to start and where to end, but I would say pulling off a dissertation in qualitative work. The combination of uh, approaches you're using is actually something I continue admiring and speaks to the richness of qualitative analysis that until you're engaged in it, you'll actually, think it's easy, but that is quite a lot of work you put in there. And even having a committee that is flexible enough for you to turn it into a poem is actually, another thing. And I was blown away by the fact that you actually, turned it into some kind of poem as well. At that point, I think, speaks volumes again. So maybe before the members come in there, collaborations has been a very, very big thing, of course, around, research generally. And today, from your talk, I think there are lots of things, that one could actually pick up on. But one of the things that I follow up on is, and I think you speak about it in the poem, uh, most of this data, you'll collaborate. Somebody takes away the data, publishes, and probably says thank you, right? Acknowledges you, and most of this is placed in depending on the university, because professors or people are chasing promotions or tenure track, all of that. Of course, the impact factor of the journal really does matter, but then how does that fare with other society? Oh, let's say the collective responsibility to the people, the research participants and all of that. If the data is not really percolating to them, down there as well, because it is locked up in this high impact, factor journals. And most of the time, of course, you have to access it as a member or, any of that. Do you think this is disadvantaging actually the learning in the context of Africa as well? The growth of African journals themselves, run by, the African researchers and collaborators out there. Like, I'm just looking for your comment, in terms of that, because yes, we do see that, there are efforts to have journals by scientists and, uh, other professionals on the continent as well. But do you think this disadvantages as the system goes on, and this high impact, low impact, and all that? Is it science, just the science, and that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I didn't specialize in that, but I'll do some justice to it.
Yeah.
So as I was writing my dissertation, there was a whole discussion that came up at Oxford with the Africans there, and they had a whole journal on collaboration.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came out of that is the tenure track culture in the West. So that some of the universities in Africa don't have. So when a scientist or a researcher from the West goes to Africa to do research, they are going with that mind. They're going to publish articles, and they'll come and publish articles. And even the people in the global South, the professors, well, they might never know about it because they some of the universities have not put that in place. But they're pushing for an ethical way of doing things that you that Africans are not just mining knowledge, doing interviews, being involved even in the writing and not being recognized. And we're not looking for recognition where people are just putting a footnote that says, oh, these people were involved. It's that they're also knowledge makers. So are they going to be first, second, third, author? So Africans learning to have agency so that whenever there's an article that will come out of the work they're doing in the field, they are included and they discuss the authorship. And in sciences, the authorship is clearly stated. Who is the first? I'm a postdoc. In most cases, I come as a first author in most of the articles that I've done now, and I do the work. You're not just being placed as the first author. Now, my advisor, who is now a renowned professor, and he always takes the last authorship. Yeah. So when we have an assistant professor, they can only be first, second, or third author, because that will count. Because then when I'm looking as a postdoc, when I'm looking for a job, there go people. My committee is going to be looking at which has been your position for authorship. You know,
Mhm.
so we are working with some PhD students in Africa, and some of them have finished. They don't have the postdoc pathway here, so we always have to negotiate this. That you know, we know that you are going to build a career, and I thank God that I work in a setting that is very open and it's very democratic. So if he's writing a lot of it and collecting the data, he should be the first author. So it's not all the time that I'm the first author. So there are those discussions that were ongoing, and are they always practiced? Maybe not, because people in Africa don't know. So yeah, but the organization I was working with, it's a scientific organization, and their promotion is based on publication. So you see, if a scientist from the global north goes in there and makes this guy work, and then takes away the data and the specimen and never recognizes him, it's it's going to affect his or her promotion. Yeah. So it's really a matter of scientists being very ethical and being very candid when they're interacting with people on the global south. Because left to their own devices, they will do they will. It's easy to con people on the continent. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's welcome other comments, questions, and yeah, some yeah. Anyone, you can just pick up.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Okay, please.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Lutomia, for this very wonderful talk. I wouldn't say it's new to me. Your research is new. Of course, your work is really new. I had a discussion. I haven't heard you present about your work, but I'm saying, being at MSU, we have the Alliance for African Partnership, and basically your talk is so much AAP. I would say, like, it really reflects or speaks into there's so many ideas that AAP is trying to work with, is trying to align, because basically what they're trying to do is to rethink the way the West, especially, I would say, partners with Africa, specifically because it's an alliance for African partnership and perhaps other developing uh, regions of the world. So when we talk about power asymmetry, I mean, that's really big when it comes to partnerships, especially the North-South partnerships. And my question is, this has been discussed elsewhere for sure, like this is how we're supposed to do it, but do you think really is it even achievable? Like, will there in the near future be a balance of power when we're dealing with North-South collaborations, especially? Talk about finances. How do we handle the financial part, for example? Is it equality? Is it equity? I'm at MSU, somebody is working in an organization, a university, a research organization in Africa. Let's even talk about remuneration, salaries. We talk about the same, if you're a professor, senior professor in that institution, I'm a senior professor at MSU. How do we discuss the payment, the funding that goes to reimbursing the researchers? So this asymmetrical relationship actually really bothers me for the most part, because I don't know, we talk, and it's good to keep talking about these things, but do you think it's something that is going to be aligned or worked on anytime soon?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, that question uh, is necessary, and it's a wealth of questions, Amaris. And I've always thought about it as I worked with these scientists, because they come from countries. The problem is also our countries. How much money are we putting in research? So our governments don't invest in science. Yeah, and then I had a discussion with my advisor who was completing this dissertation along along seeing the social injustice that was happening to these scientists just because they're from the global south, in the ways that they're being remunerated, their recognition of their science, the opportunities that they get. Because one of the issues that also came up was that sometimes when people have collaborations, they never have. It's always the scientists in the global north going to the global south. There's never a point when the other ones come to the global north. The scientists complained about that. And one of the things that COVID-19 has done, it has flattened that. So the scientists are talking to each other via Zoom. You know, it's of course I sit at meetings where people are like, oh, we can't wait for COVID to come, and then we can go to Africa. So we never hear the same from the other side. But I was directed to the work of Habermas and humanizing organizations and work. So I think as we look at the whole discourse that is going on the continent around decolonizing institutions, maybe there has to be a point where we're discussing about decolonizing science, especially the work itself, how science is done and how individuals are recognized. There has to be a discussion on doing that, in ways of doing that. Now, uh, this interested me because I've also worked in international organizations in Africa, and uh, I see there's some self-interest among Africans who work in this setting and why they don't change the rules. Because I worked in an international organization in Kenya, an NGO, and we Kenyans were paid less than uh, the other Africans from other African countries. They were treated like expatriates. So it's also that the politics of expatriates. So you see, when I talked to when I talked privately to some scientists, and also knowing myself the psyche that exists in expatriate world in Africa, I don't think many scientists of African descent working on the African continent are interested in the project of changing everything for everyone, of bringing this subject up, where they are flattening the curve of how they're remunerated and how white people are remunerated. Because if you these benefits, you can, the chances of you getting these benefits, because if you go and work in Nairobi and you come from Benin, you're treated like an expatriate. So you're treated like white people. So if you start advocating for that, they're scared of changing that benefit. So there's a little bit of selfishness among Africans too, who work in international organizations, because they're just waiting for their turn. Yeah. So when you'll be posted to Nigeria or South Africa, you will get your per diem. Your children can go to private schools. You can get that ticket for holidays. You can live in a posh part of the city. So that's the work that needs to be done around humanizing international scientific collaboration, both along Africans themselves and then along the North-South collaboration. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's ongoing. I don't think I've tackled it very well because it's so much. Yeah. There's so much. There's a little bit of work that has been done around Africans being able to publish. Like there's a journal called Scientific. I forget scientific something that is. It's by Springer, and now it has enabled Africans on the continent to be able to publish. You know, so you're publishing at a relatively high impact journal, and you're speaking with other scientists on the continent. Yeah.
That's really wonderful. And also, even I've had this discussion elsewhere about in-kind contributions. I mean, we shouldn't be looking into the financial. Let's say the project is funded. Of course, maybe the funding didn't come from the south part, right? But what in-kind contributions do the partners bring on the table? It doesn't have to be funding, but those are things that collaborations should consider. Like as you said, as in the conceiving process where you're looking at what are we really going to do as partners. This should be something that actually I think is important to also talk about, bring up that we're not tagging along. We should discuss what am I bringing as a person. If I didn't bring the finances, what am I bringing? Like it should be recognized as contributions, different kinds of contributions should also be recognized as important and essential contributions. I mean, I'm just
Yeah, that's very true. Because there are things that we're able to do as scientists based in the global north that are smoothened by those ones in the global south. Like I'm doing COVID-19, I'm based here. I'm able to use my network here as a Kenyan or sometimes as an African in countries that I worked with earlier on. But then they go over and beyond. And in fact, now when we have to have another discussion about what even the finances that Africans are putting into some of the collaborations. Because if I'm picking a phone and I'm calling a young man in Nairobi to get me data on something, or we're just starting to discuss about the data I'm interested in. At that point, the project has not started. He's already using his bundles, his money.
Mm-hmm.
You see, there are ways that we use finances in Africa, of people's finances, that are never really calculated, and Africans don't speak to them. That sometimes Africans are read not to contribute financially, and they read themselves as powerless, and yet they're very powerful. And sometimes they're putting into the project more than the funder is putting in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll let others contribute. Thank you.
All right, let's hear from some others. Looks like there is none. So, okay. Okay, if there is none, yes. Damaris, you're saying something?
Yes.
Yes.
I really don't want to dominate. If somebody has a comment or something to say, I'll be happy to give them a chance. But I was also wanting to ask, you didn't speak, you have actually spoken into this a little bit about South-South collaborations. I know it's not part of what your research was looking into, but do you think, and again, you mentioned the Anglophone, the Francophone, also dimension of working even within Africa, let's say within the continent. So what would you comment about the South-South collaborations? Do we have many of these? Or if we don't, would issues like the differences in language, especially North and North, actually, yeah, no, different, let's just call it the linguistic differences within Africa, do you think contributes to anything, or it's basically something else that contributes to lack of collaborations, many collaborations, or significant collaborations within the South South?
Okay, good. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't speak to it in my presentation, but yeah, that's a segment I looked at too. I looked at South-South collaboration and especially scientific collaboration, and they are also generally thought to be good, mostly because you're having people who have a lot of similarities between them. They're they speak the same language. Sometimes they got the same experiences, accesses, the cultures. There's no time difference as such. Uh, they understand management, how they understand their management cultures. So when I went in to study South-South collaborations, especially in Africa, what you're seeing is a robust movement over India and China. They're not, China is always shifting with, yeah, it's sometimes red as south. So India and China, they do a lot of collaborations, South side collaborations, a lot of African countries, and some of it, most what has happened that is amazing is in the educating of a critical mass of African scientists, most of them getting scholarships into China and India, but a lot of them are going into China. And as they're doing that, they're doing research, and all these organizations too doing research, and within the work that scientists from China do on the African continent cannot be thought to be neutral of the North, because sometimes the North South there's a collaboration. Some of the work that the Chinese and African scientists are doing, then you see they're collaborating with the Southern partnerships, because a lot of their work they're publishing with Lancet, with all these international journals. Because scientists, there's the top three journals that you want to publish with is Science, Journal of Nature, Lancet. Yeah, so it brings everyone publishes there together. They're conversation with each other. Uh, there are politics around that, and some of the politics when you look at India and China, some of the politics that we have with the North tend to bleed also into what we're experiencing with China and India. It's the same dominating, asymmetrical. Who is the lead author? This kind of thing. So you're seeing that behavior also trying to emerge. They they don't have key research institutes like the ones that the North uh, established before. That there, because if I'm talking about institutions like ICRAF, CGIARA, IITA. These are major research institutions, mostly funded by the North. Yeah, so they've not gone into that category. But here, there's a lot of funding going to scientific work by them. But another segment that was very interesting to me was now zooming onto the African continent itself, how the scientists are working. It's interesting because what you see in the so-called SADC countries, the South African countries, so that's Botswana, uh, South Africa, Zimbabwe, that belt, Namibia, they really are in conversation with each other. There's a lot of research. South Africa definitely tends to be global, and then, but there's a lot of they produce a lot of research, and they're very well funded. Now, another shooting that you see, if you look at that map, is you're seeing Nigeria research too. There's a lot of West Africa. There's a lot coming out of there, and sometimes you see a lot of research. Nairobi, for example, sometimes there's a lot of research coming out of there because of the international organization. So, and then they collaborate with other Africans. There's not a lot of robust research with the East Africans. There's some, but I'd have expected more. But you're seeing more. I saw more networks in West Africa, a lot of networks in South Africa. And when I read articles, they were problematizing the way the people in the Southern Belt collaborate. Because when you look at the way they're citing each other, they don't cite the other people. They're just citing each other around that area. So that's another criticism. Because collaboration is not just the work that they do in the field, but collaboration also can be zoned into production of research articles. So peers collaborating with each other, citing each other, all that kind of work. So that was also another issue that was coming up. South Africa, for example, has amazing opportunities with everyone globally wanting to publish with the scientists there because of their strong institutions. You know, yeah. Yes, yeah. Thank you so much about that. But I also wanted to chime into my experience in working in a South-South collaboration. I worked with the Packard Foundation on a Packard Foundation project when I worked in an international organization in Kenya, and I was in charge of Sudan, uh, especially the Khartoum-based Sudan, and then northern Nigeria. And we were also working with Indonesia and Ethiopia. But we were working with the Muslim community. So I spent a lot of time in northern Nigeria, working there. But you see the kind of this were what we're developing leaders in these spaces. So you're seeing South-South collaboration because it's Indonesians, the Muslims in Ethiopia, the Muslims in Sudan, and the Muslims in Nigeria. So when I worked in Nigeria, I was mostly doing the 12 states in the north, doing Maiduguri, Kano, all those places in the north, and seeing, and it was a time where I had to cover myself and visit all these leaders. And what I'm actually introducing is family planning, but I'm calling it child spacing, you know. But we're doing that because if you work with Indonesians and all this, the Muslim world, there's a certain language they use when they're talking about family planning. And when it comes to leadership development, there's also a certain way that you have to couch leadership development. So I was going to the mosque to meet the imams, the non-profit leaders, and all that, and the same, almost the same etiquette or manner of working was being used in these other countries. Then we'd bring them all to Nairobi for them to learn and interact with each other, you know. So it was very interesting to see the lessons learned and the way the project went on and the lessons they were learning about each other on developing their organizations and introducing women into leadership and introducing child spaces and child spacing in communities. We're also working with the university. I was working with Ahmed Bello in northern Nigeria. So and working with the women's a famous women's university in Sudan. So those become also the key spaces for forming and creating knowledge and helping it to disperse into the community. But you see, that way you're seeing we're involving non-profit organizations, the Muslim leaders, and the universities in the Muslim world. So when it comes to, I just felt like we did a very good job working on this leadership development project by Packard Foundation because we considered how Muslim societies see themselves. They're very anchored, yes, in their families, in the mosque, in their schools, and the leaders are known. The leaders of these institutions are known to the community. So yeah, I found that a little bit exciting and something that I think we can do more uh, when we look at South-South collaboration. Maybe we need to engage the culture of our people. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I know we have probably exhausted your energies. We've been at it, for a while, but maybe I beg to, end here, but definitely say we look forward to, reading more of those poems and those works. And No, it has to be, in my view, made available in in some form, and definitely has a lot of impact. Like Dr. Damaris said, this is a conversation that's ongoing with the AAP as well. I remember when they were going through the co-creation and all of that, and the talks of how do we anchor this to a point that we have to, for example, start rotating even areas where we meet, the meeting venues, and it takes the leadership where, who is the co-director, who is. But again, when you look at this, it's also a space of still, in my view, sophisticated, high. These are collaborations that have started, also spanned some years, and like you did say, this is a relationship we establish at the PhD levels, and with either the advisors or colleagues, and then it kind of goes on. So I think, to respond to Dr. Damaris, I would say yes, a time is definitely going to come when I think there will be some kind of a relatively leveled ground in terms of who says, and I think we already see that in terms of the IRBs, that the researchers have to go through as they get into the content, and like they're very rigorous in terms of what you do and all of that. So in fact, I was looking at remembering one of the key things there, that somebody contacts you through Google, and then you send a specimen, and all of that. Like this has been a little, I think, depends on the specimen as well, but I think most countries are tightening, and trying to establish a certain standard way of operation, because the systems have been abused a lot. But again, a lot of room for proper collaborations, and for the learning to go on. So I guess the networking is really a big thing. One of the biggest, though, I've always had with the networking is that looks like the people that network again and back to you are the top, guys at the top, and they don't give chance to the people that actually, like you've said, go to the gardens and get to do this. And so it's a conversation that has to continue. But even the both sides have to kind of look at themselves and see where to iterate and move forward. But I love the fact that this is going. In fact, one of the things I try to do these days is try to find um, articles, especially in my area, for example, of autism. I keep looking at this, is that it's not a lot that's published out there, and most of it is in South Africa, or like you did say, West Africa. And this is, these are people that know what they're doing. It's just that some of these are not really considered the high impact, but you get really, really wonderful information. But you could get pinged by, oh, was this peer reviewed, and all of that, which I think, again, as we continue getting the space, and I think people need to push to be reviewers of various journals as well, to actually be in a position to argue that this is something. And yep, I don't know, any closing comments from Dr. Chioti? You're on mute.
Sorry, I really don't have much, but I want to announce our very last tea time event that is happening in 2 weeks. It's going to be on April 8th. I can't believe the semester is gone, and we're talking about our very last tea time event. And it's going to look into the contribution of beekeeping to livelihoods and biodiversity, and the countries will be in Africa. That is, the countries though we'll be focusing on is not Uganda, sorry, it's Sudan and Rwanda. So we invite you back to have a discussion on what do we think beekeeping is doing, is contributing to not just livelihoods, because that's what we would imagine, but then biodiversity as well. So there's been so much research around beekeeping, not just in Africa, but then all over the world. It hasn't been something that has been discussed much, but we want to hear what research is going on, or what are the benefits, particularly in Africa. So that's all I can say, but thank you so much, Jorem, for doing this. I can let you thank the speaker.
Thank you
I
so
forgot to
much.
say this. For those of you interested in issues to do with international scientific collaborations, mostly to do with Africa, there, it's SOAS at Oxford, holds discussions around this. And there are also some young Africans who are always looking around and looking at practices of collaborations and holding people accountable on social media, especially Twitter. For example, she's Chisomo. She's from Malawi,
Mhm.
but based in Scotland. She's always sharing her experiences, putting people on blast. People who do practices. Yeah, and I'm in agreement. International scientific collaboration, especially North-South collaboration, has it's going to shift. It's going to change. There's a future for it. There's a time where I think we'll access equality. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Lutomia, for
Mm.
getting us that what close to 2 hours of your time. This afternoon, evening. Yes, thank you so much, and thank you so much to everyone that made it a point to stay. I see Michael. Thank you so much for and Dr. Delil. I see lots of people that I do know here. So it's one of those things where you are really glad to place faces, despite the fact that we probably text back and forth. And again, thank you so much. And let's meet the next time, and we talk about bees. And yep, thank you for enriching us today. And thank you, and bye for this
Thank you, Bert.
edition. Yep.